They say that beggars can't be choosers. This saying makes me think of a time many years ago when I was volunteering at a soup kitchen. One of the clients came up with the complaint saying, "I can't eat this," expletive redacted. It stood out on my mind in part because earlier that same day at my day job, working at a lunch counter, a customer had come up to me with a very similar complaint. And it gave me a moment to stop and reflect about these two different men, the paying customer and the beggar, and my own reaction to each of their complaints. Now, in each case, my job was basically the same. I was giving food to those who needed it, and both men got basically what they would have expected coming in where they came in. There was no defect, nothing objectively wrong with any of the food that we were offering in either case. Just, they didn't like it. So it made me wonder, is it fair that one of them gets special treatment, the other one is expected to just take whatever he's given and be glad for it? Is that just? What would Jesus do? I think St. Paul says it fairly nicely in today's letter. And he says, "If we are unfaithful, Jesus remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself." And the psalmist says that he remembers his kindness and faithfulness, his justice revealed to the nations. And I think this is part of that essence, that undeniable essence of what Jesus is. Anyone who's worked in customer service, or for that matter, anyone who's been a parent, or really anyone who's ever had any kind of relationship with any other human being, might appreciate this sense of divine patience in giving even when it seems thankless, unappreciated. I didn't quit my job that day after the one customer complaint. I didn't walk out on the soup kitchen. Parents in general don't abandon their children. We don't leave our loved ones behind when someone forgets to say thank you. In today's gospel, Jesus heals 10 lepers, and only one of them comes back to give thanks and praise to God. We might flip that a little bit, look at it from another perspective, and say that only one of these men was truly grateful, and yet all 10 were healed. Jesus doesn't withhold his healing, he doesn't revoke his healing based on whether or not he feels appreciated. What Jesus gives, he gives freely to all. There is no payment that we could offer for what he gives, for our life, our health, our comforts, and our welfare, for his own life offered on the cross for our salvation, his body and blood offered here today on the altar in the Eucharist. Jesus gives us everything we need to sustain both our physical and our spiritual well-being. And there is no price we could pay, no exchange we could make, no possible remuneration that would come close to the value of what Jesus gives us. So Jesus does not distinguish between the paying customer and the beggar, because in God's eyes we are all equal. We're all beggars. In our first reading today from 2 Kings, we get the very end of a longer story. If we look back a little bit to the beginning of chapter 5 of 2 Kings, that's where we're introduced to Naaman, who's a foreign army commander who goes to Israel seeking a cure for his leprosy. And when the prophet Elisha tells him to bathe 7 times in the Jordan River, Naaman gets angry about that. He says, I have rivers back at home, better rivers than what you have here. Why did I have to come all this way just for that? But his servants are the ones who calm him down. They say, if this prophet had given you some complex and elaborate ritual, you'd have done that. Here he's given you something very simple. Shouldn't you at least try it? So Naaman swallows his pride. He actually humbles himself to take the advice of his servants. And the end result is what we hear in today's first reading. He bathes himself in the Jordan River and he's cured. His earlier indignance and ingratitude are not held against him, but are transformed ultimately into gratitude. I think gratitude is an important and maybe too often overlooked virtue. But gratitude strengthens our relationships. It builds up our appreciation for one another. When we're grateful, we're just more likable. People appreciate us more. We're generally easier to get along with. I think it's generally true of our relationships with one another. It's also true of our relationship with God. Saint Therese of Lisieux said, "It is the spirit of gratitude that calls down upon us the overflow of God's grace. For no sooner have we thanked him for one blessing, and he hastens to send us 10 additional blessings in return." She goes on to describe this exponential increase in grace and gratitude. Concludes by saying, "This has been my own personal experience. Try it for yourself and see." Maybe we should try it for ourselves and see. I said earlier that before God we are all beggars, but God in his generosity and his kindness never makes us beg. His gifts, his graces, all his goodness is offered to us before we even ask for it. And while the world may say that beggars can't be choosers, Christ gives us the choice to accept his graces or not, to respond with gratitude or not. As we continue in our celebration this morning, as we prepare to receive Christ in the Eucharist, maybe we can take this opportunity to remember everything that Christ has done for us, that he gives us every day. And as with those 10 lepers, Jesus gives us his blessing, his grace, his whole self freely. So the question then that we ask ourselves as we come forward to receive him is, are we going to be like those 9 who take and then go about the rest of our day as if nothing special happened? Or are we going to be that one who recognizes what Christ has done for us and gives glory and thanks to God?